Okay, welcome to the Cavendish Talks in conversation with Tom Kelly, who's here with the Irish Minister for European Affairs, Minister of State Department Taoiseach, Foreign Affairs and Defence. You're very welcome. Thomas Byrne is a TD for Meath and a former lawyer. Thomas, how would you describe the relations between the UK and Ireland immediately post-Brexit and then effectively the deterioration when they left?
I think relations did start to deteriorate post-Brexit, and there were a number of reasons for that. One was the very fact of Brexit, that we are now, rather than sitting beside each other at the European table, rather than having our offices actually next door in the European Council building, we're now on really opposite sides of the negotiating table. But it wasn't just that. You had the Theresa May government had narrow or no majority in the House of Commons. That meant ministers actually had to stay behind for votes. A lot of times I think the British side at that time would say that they didn't really engage as much maybe as they should have. Then you had COVID as well, and then really difficult times during the negotiations at various points under Theresa May and under Boris Johnson. So there was a lack of contact, I would say, rather than maybe bad relations. And all of that affected it. So that's the scenario, and it wasn't good for any of us that contact wasn't happening. Like, ministers wouldn't really have known their counterparts as well as they should have, and occasionally in meetings, the conversation was a bit stilted, because some British ministers would have had to read from particular talking points at the time, and they may not have totally agreed with the government position.
Well, in terms of the new government coming in, well, relatively new now, could you talk to us about how Labour have approached the relationship with your own government?
Well, I can just say that under Rishi Sunak, and it's important for us to be non-partisan from an Irish government point of view. Under Rishi Sunak, I think relations did start to improve. There was a lot more contact, and there was really good contact between Taoiseach and Rishi Sunak, and they were engaging in a much more positive way. And COVID was over, and the issues in Parliament were not as acute. So things started to change then. But they've definitely taken on a totally new phase under Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. That's very welcome. I think the Labour Party, for example, were in power when Tony Blair and Bertie Ahern brought the Good Friday Agreement together. And I think that's very much an institutional memory of the Labour Party. I think it's very important to them. And I think the relations are much more intense now. There's a lot more contact between ministers. I've visited, for example, my counterpart Stephen Doughty in London. He's also visited me in Dublin, and there are other examples of that. Most recently, the Taoiseach and Prime Minister Starmer, just this very weekend, had a meeting in London too. So those contacts are much more intense, and that's really, really positive, because there's a lot of people from Ireland living in Britain, huge amount. There's a huge amount of British people living in Ireland too. We have a border on the island. There are people living in Northern Ireland who want to be part of Ireland, and there's people in Northern Ireland who want to stay part of the UK. So relations are totally intertangled. And it's really important that the governments work closely together to protect the Good Friday Agreement.
Is that why, Minister, ultimately the Irish government prioritises bilateral relationships now with Britain?
Well, we've always prioritised bilateral relations with Britain, certainly in the last number of decades. So now we have an opportunity to actually not just prioritise those relations, but to develop and deepen them. So I think we believe we have to, for the reasons that I've mentioned. The Good Friday Agreement, of course, is paramount. And we really believe that it's essential to have a good East-West relationship, so that you can have a foundation for the North-South relationship and the internal relationships in Northern Ireland to sit on. I think that's really important. It's the three strands, as John Hume, I think, conceived of many, many years ago. So for all those reasons, that we see relations as really, really important with Britain.
The Shared Islands Unit, which has been an incredible initiative by the Taoiseach, depends on, joint projects between Northern Ireland Stormont Executive or the British Executive. Now, sources close to the British side said, yes, they think it's a brilliant idea, that it's something that they want to engage with, but they're restricted in terms of what they can actually create partnership on because of a lack of funding.
Well, look, I think the Shared Island Unit has a number of functions. One is simply to bring people together. I think it has done that on a number of occasions, where there have been various encounters where people from the north meet people from the south, or there's internal encounters, whatever. It's also there to develop practical solutions that benefit everybody on this shared island: transport links, tourism connections, education and research connections. So there's all of that. And that's instead of simply having a head count or dealing with head count politics, which is very, very easy to do. It's very, very attractive, but it's actually harder to do what the Taoiseach is trying to do, which is to create genuine links north and south and within the north. And I would say with the British government, going back to the Boris Johnson government, that the depths of the lack of relationship that we talk about. There was the Peace Plus program, which has existed for a number of years, but it was agreed to be jointly funded by Ireland, Britain and the European Commission during the Johnson government. So even then, there was a British government commitment to co-funding with the European Union and the Irish government of Peace Plus, and we hope that would be continued now in the next multi-annual financial framework. So we've always seen an open door from the British. I mean, of course, resources are never unlimited, but we think there are huge opportunities to benefit Northern Ireland, like the A5, but that also benefits the rest of us, the rest of the island too, because that's a very important connection between, I suppose, Derry, Stoke, Donegal and Dublin. So these things benefit everybody.
Ireland now has diplomatic missions in Cardiff and Edinburgh and Manchester, as well as London. Does that reflect a growing recognition of the importance of devolution in terms of your relationships with Britain?
Yes, but I think yes, because part of the reason for having diplomatic presences is to engage with the governments in whatever city they're in. So in London, they will be dealing with central government. The ambassador will have a role, of course, throughout Great Britain. But obviously the consulate in Wales has connections with politicians in Wales, the consulate in Edinburgh, similarly in Scotland, and indeed in the Northwest. They're also there to serve the needs of the Irish communities as well, which are pretty significant in Scotland, in Wales, and particularly the northwest of England. So there's a lot of community outreach there they do. Our consulates are also pretty much like one-stop shops for whether it's investment into Ireland or Irish companies investing into Britain, or indeed food promotion, tourism promotion. Of course, tourism is an all-Ireland competence as well under the Good Friday Agreement as Tourism Ireland. So you would find that our consulates work on that wide range of issues, and it's about having a strong diplomatic footprint from Ireland in those areas that brings benefit not just to us, but to the Irish communities and indeed the overall relationship.
You've mentioned the Good Friday Agreement there. The Prime Minister Starmer has suggested that he may now tamper following a restructure with the European Court of Human Rights in part of his package to curtail illegal immigration. Is the Irish government worried about that and its impact on the Good Friday Agreement?
No, we've engaged with whatever proposals are put forward by the British. I mean, I don't think Prime Minister Starmer has proposed that he would withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights. And I think they have other proposals around migration from Italy and Denmark as well. And these things are discussed at the Committee of Ministers in Strasbourg in the Council of Europe, which is overall responsibility for the Convention on Human Rights. So we welcome any engagement from Britain and other countries as well. We can discuss so we can defend our own position as well on that, as all the other member states do, and all the other member states have a role there as well. The important point is that the Good Friday Agreement incorporates the Convention on Human Rights. So it's not like before when there were suggestions that Britain would pull out of the Convention on Human Rights or the Council of Europe. That's not going to happen. It's not legally possible for it to happen, but Britain wouldn't be the only country to have soft changes to the convention.
Reform and the Conservatives have both now promised to withdraw completely from the European Court of Human Rights, and polls suggest that the kind of majorities that they would have combined would have an impact on the government in Britain. Is that a realistic threat now towards British-Irish relations? And has anyone reached out to Farage, for example?
Look, that's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. It would be a breach of international law. Mm-hmm. Britain was one of the founding member states, founding visionaries, Churchill and others as well, of the Council of Europe. It's such an important body. It's there to protect people. If there are tweaks needed, let's see what's proposed, and we can all consider them. But there's no chance of Britain leaving it, because it would be completely in breach of the Good Friday Agreement, over which they have to stand over, and that's for the benefit not just of the people in Northern Ireland, but the benefit people in the island of Ireland and Great Britain as well.
Ireland, obviously remaining within the EU, helps Britain in its relationships, its own relationships with Europe. And how do you think that would continue? Because a former ambassador told me that you once had up to 3,000 meetings a year, which sounds phenomenal, between officials, politicians at an EU level. Do you think you might be a bridge to better relations for the British as well?
But from a practical point of view, as I said, our offices were next door in the council building. So that would have, every day there would be different officials, different politicians going through those doors, depending on what the issue of the day was. And there's always an opportunity to talk to the people that you see most regularly. So it's a real tragedy that that's gone. But we're Team EU. Britain is not part of the EU. But I suppose we've always advocated strongly for really, really positive relations with the UK. And we advocated, we didn't advocate for the UK in recent discussions with the EU. We advocated for the EU to adopt a position that would benefit us all, which is have really good relations with Britain and to develop the opportunities that were there, particularly on the import and export of food. I mean, that's and plant products. That's been a major issue that really wasn't dealt with properly by the British side at all when they conceived of this Brexit idea. I think Keir Starmer's government has worked to rectify that, and potentially at one point that might have been pretty controversial for them. I don't think it has been, because it was a bad move from a British point of view originally. So certainly we would be to the fore advocating for this, but the reality is most European countries saw the sense in it too. So we wouldn't see ourselves as an advocate for Britain within the EU. They're big enough and strong enough to do a lot of that themselves, but we definitely see the value of really strong relations between the EU and the UK. And now we see as well in the security and defence sphere that there is a very tight relationship between Britain and the European Union. And again, we welcome that. We have no issue with that whatsoever. We think it will help all the other areas of cooperation.
Okay. And the final question, Minister, is going forward, what do you see as the major challenges to the British-Irish relationship going forward?
Look, the challenges, of course, are always political. Like, we need to have a government there that sees the Good Friday Agreement the way all previous governments have seen it, as sacrosanct. And I think that's the case certainly now. It's been the case under every British government, really. Like, despite one or two comments, it really has been the case since it was brought in. We need to preserve the knowledge on that, the reasons for it, and just keep reminding ourselves that there's so many Irish in Britain and so many British and Irish in Ireland, and that's something that sometimes people forget when they start waving flags. And I think it's important to bear that in mind.